Who do you think has been paying for your lifestyle all these years? My father roared, his face crimson with rage as he slammed his fist against the mahogany dining table. After everything we've sacrificed for you. My mother stood behind him, arms crossed, nodding in agreement as they confronted me about declining to fund my brother's third failed business venture. They had no idea that the trust fund they thought was supporting me had been depleted years ago, or that I'd quietly built a $90 million tech empire while living in a modest apartment and driving a 10-year-old sedan. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The contrast couldn't have been more stark or more public. We sat under the white event tent on the sprawling lawn of my parents' Westchester estate, celebrating 2 graduations simultaneously: my brother Derek's completion of his MBA from Cornell, and my doctorate in computer science from MIT. The tent was adorned with Cornell's red and white colors, no MIT gray in sight. I watched as my father stood, champagne flute raised, drawing everyone's attention. 70 guests fell silent: extended family, longtime neighbors, my parents' country club friends, and a handful of Derek's fraternity brothers who were still nursing hangovers from the previous night's pre-graduation rager at my parents' pool house. Today, we celebrate not 1 but 2 academic achievements in our family, my father began, his voice carrying that practiced public speaking tone he'd perfected over decades as a corporate attorney. Derek has completed his Master of Business Administration, following in my footsteps and preparing to make his mark in the business world. Enthusiastic applause followed. Derek, sprawled in his chair like a king on a throne, raised his champagne with a lazy grin, soaking in the adoration. And, my father continued with noticeably less enthusiasm, Eliza has completed her doctorate in computer programming. Computer science, with a specialization in artificial intelligence and machine learning, I corrected quietly, though no one seemed to notice. Yes, that, my father said with a dismissive wave. Very technical stuff. Now, for the presents. My mother appeared with a small envelope, which she handed to me with a quick pat on the shoulder. Congratulations, sweetheart. I opened it to find a $10 gift card to Starbucks. I stared at it for a moment, unsure if this was some kind of joke. 5 years of grueling work, groundbreaking research, and countless sleepless nights, recognized, with enough credit for maybe 3 lattes. Thank you, I said automatically, the polite response ingrained after years of managing disappointment. And now for Derek, my father announced with renewed excitement. 2 staff members wheeled in, a large object covered with a red cloth. My father gripped the edge of the fabric dramatically. Son, for your achievement and to help you launch your exciting new business venture. He pulled the cloth away with a flourish. A brand new Tesla Model S. The crowd erupted in applause and gasps. Derek jumped from his seat, whooping with joy as he circled the gleaming vehicle, its metallic blue finish catching the afternoon sunlight. The car had been custom ordered with all available options, easily a $120,000 purchase. Dad! Mom! This is incredible! Derek hugged both my parents as cameras flashed. I sat clutching my $10 gift card, feeling a familiar hollow sensation in my chest. It wasn't about the material value. I could buy my own car if I wanted to. It was about what the disparity represented. The message it sent not just to me, but to everyone present. Derek's accomplishments were worthy of celebration and investment. Mine were an afterthought. Don't look so glum, Eliza, my Aunt Margaret whispered, sliding into the empty seat beside me. You know how they are. They just don't understand all that computer stuff you do. I nodded politely, though both my parents had used laptops, smartphones, and various software programs for decades. Understanding wasn't the issue. Valuing was. As guests circled the Tesla, admiring its features while Derek sat in the driver's seat showing off the massive touch screen. I slipped away from the tent. I needed space to breathe, to process yet another demonstration of where I stood in the family hierarchy. I made my way to the garden bench beneath the old oak tree, my childhood thinking spot. From here, I could see the celebration continuing. Without me. No one noticing my absence except perhaps to feel relief that my obvious disappointment wouldn't dampen the festivities. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A familiar name flashed on the screen. Rajiv Mehta, my business partner and chief operating officer. "Please tell me you have good news," I said after answering. "Better than good," Rajiv replied, excitement evident in his voice. "The Meridian acquisition is officially approved. All regulatory hurdles cleared. We're announcing to the team Monday morning, public announcement, Tuesday." I closed my eyes, letting the significance wash over me. After 4 years of building, Neuralink from a startup in my apartment to a revolutionary AI company, our technology would now be integrated into the world's largest social media platform. The acquisition price? $90 million, with me retaining a significant leadership role and equity stake in the parent company. "You did it, Eliza," Rajiv continued. "Your algorithm is going to change how people interact with technology forever. And you're now officially wealthy enough to buy your own island." I laughed softly, watching as Derek revved the Tesla's silent motor to continued applause. "I don't think I'm the island type." "Well, maybe upgrade from that shoebox apartment. And dinosaur car you insist on keeping? The team's worried you're living in poverty while developing billion-dollar technology." "I like my apartment," I replied defensively, "and my car runs perfectly fine." The truth was more complicated. My modest lifestyle wasn't just about practicality or focusing on the business. It was protective coloration. As long as my family believed I was struggling on an academic salary, they had limited expectations for what I could provide. The moment they discovered my actual worth, I knew exactly what would happen. The requests would begin, subtle at first, then increasingly direct. "Any chance you're going to tell your family about this?" Rajiv asked, knowing some of my history. "Not yet," I said, watching as my father showed off a feature on Derek's new car. "The timing's not right." "You mean you don't want them hitting you up for money?" Rajiv replied bluntly. I sighed. "It's complicated." "Family always is. Just remember, this is your achievement. You deserve to celebrate it." After hanging up, I remained on the bench, contemplating the strange parallel universes I was inhabiting. In one, I was Dr. Eliza Chen, overlooked daughter with a computer programming degree and a $10 gift card. In the other, I was Elizabeth Chen, visionary founder of Neuralink, about to be announced as the newest executive vice president at Meridian with a $90 million acquisition deal. The contrast wasn't accidental. I had deliberately kept my professional success separate from my family life, using my formal name Elizabeth professionally while remaining Eliza to my family. I maintained minimal social media presence, avoided industry publicity when possible, and had repeatedly turned down profile pieces in tech publications. My parents knew I had started some kind of computer company after graduating, but assumed it was struggling like most startups. They had made it clear from the beginning that they wouldn't be providing any financial support for such a risky venture when they were already investing heavily in Derek's more practical business ideas. Those practical ideas had included a premium water bottle brand that went bankrupt within 6 months, a cryptocurrency initiative that collapsed when Bitcoin crashed, and now his latest concept, a luxury pet spa chain targeting wealthy urbanites, for which he needed just $50,000 in startup capital. Each failure had been cushioned by my parents' unwavering support, both emotional and financial. Each of my successes, meanwhile, had been met with polite disinterest or subtle undermining. When I published my doctoral research to significant academic acclaim, my mother had asked if this meant I would finally get a real job. When I secured our first $1 million funding round, my father had warned me, not to get too excited about monopoly money from tech investors. Their dismissal of my work had once been deeply painful. Now it served as a convenient shield, allowing me to build my company without their interference or expectations. I was pulled from my thoughts by the sound of approaching footsteps on the garden path. Derek sauntered toward me, car keys dangling from his finger. "Hey, Brainiac," he called, using the childhood nickname that had once been affectionate, but now carried a subtle edge of mockery. "Why are you hiding out here? Missing your computer screen?" "Congratulations on the car," I said, ignoring his question. "It's quite a graduation gift." Derek dropped onto the bench beside me, smelling of expensive cologne and the champagne. He'd been drinking since before noon. "Thanks. Sorry about your gift card. That was pretty brutal." I shrugged. "I'm used to it." "You should be," he said with a laugh that held no real humor. "Remember when I got the Rolex for my college graduation and you got that science calculator thing?" "Graphing calculator," I corrected automatically. "For my high school graduation, actually." Derek waved dismissively. "Whatever. Look, don't take it personally. Mom and Dad just understand my needs better. Starting a business requires capital, you know. Real investment." I bit back the response that threatened to escape, that I had intimately understood the capital requirements of starting a business, having bootstrapped mine from my graduate student stipend and maxed out credit cards before securing our first round of venture funding. "Dad said he's fronting you money for another business?" I asked instead. Derek's face lit up. "Luxury pet spas, it's going to be huge. Premium grooming, massage therapy, acupuncture, custom diet plans, all for the four-legged family members of the 1%. We're calling it Paw Spa Royale." "Interesting concept," I offered neutrally. "It's more than a concept. It's a guaranteed gold mine. People spend ridiculous money on their pets. And unlike my other ventures, this one has practically no downside." I had heard similar proclamations before each of his previous failures, delivered with the same absolute confidence. "Dad's putting in $50K to secure the first location, but I'm going to need more investors for the full launch." Derek gave me a sideways glance. "I know you don't have much with your academic salary, but if you wanted to throw in whatever you can, I'd give you a friends and family discount on the investment shares." And there it was, the familiar assumption that while I couldn't contribute much, I should contribute whatever I could to his ventures. The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so frustrating. "I don't think I can help with this one," I said carefully. Derek's expression hardened slightly. "Why not? Too busy with your little coding projects?" Before I could respond, my mother's voice called from the tent. "Derek, the Andersons want to see your new car." Derek stood, his momentary annoyance replaced with renewed excitement about his gift. "Coming!" He looked back at me. "Think about the investment, Eliza. This could be huge for both of us. Wouldn't it be nice to finally have something substantial to show for all those years of education?" As he jogged back toward the admiring crowd, I remained on the bench, turning his words over in my mind. Something substantial to show. As if my work, creating artificial intelligence that would transform how people interacted with technology, was somehow less real, less valuable than a luxury pet spa concept that would likely collapse within a year. I stayed in the garden until the celebration began to wind down, guests departing with final congratulations to Derek and barely their acknowledgments of my achievement. My parents didn't seem to notice my absence until they were saying goodbye. To the last guests, "There you are, Eliza," my mother said, finding me still on the garden bench. "You disappeared. The Warrens' daughter just finished dental school. I wanted to introduce you." "Sorry," I said, though I wasn't. The attempted matchmaking was another familiar pattern, my mother's ongoing concern that my focus on education and work was preventing me from finding a husband. "Well, they're gone now," she said with a sigh of disappointment. "Derek's taking some friends out in his new car. Your father and I are exhausted. Will you be staying overnight? No, I need to get back to the city. I have work tomorrow. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My mother frowned. On a Sunday? That university works you too hard for what they pay. It's not for the university, I said. It's for my company. Oh, that little startup thing, is it still going? She sounded genuinely surprised, which might have been hurtful if it weren't so useful to my continued privacy. It's still going, I confirmed without elaboration. Well, don't work too hard, and think about taking a real vacation sometime. You're always so serious. I nodded, accepting the familiar criticism without comment. My mother couldn't understand that what she perceived as joyless dedication had been the most exhilarating journey of my life. Building Neuralink hadn't been a sacrifice. It had been a passion, a mission, a calling that energized rather than depleted me. As I drove my 10-year-old Honda back to my modest one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, I contemplated the two parallel lives I was leading. In one, I was the overlooked daughter, the academic disappointment who couldn't seem to translate her education into tangible success. In the other, I was a technological innovator on the verge of significant wealth and influence. The decision to keep these worlds separate had been deliberate, a form of self-protection born from years of experiencing how my family operated. I had watched as Derek received not just material advantages, but unwavering emotional support through repeated failures, while my successes were minimized or ignored entirely. I had learned early that in my family's value system, the appearance of success mattered more than actual achievement. Derek looked the part of the successful son, confident, socially adept, ambitious in ways my parents understood. I, with my focus on complex technological problems and indifference to status symbols, did not fit their template for success. As I unlocked the door to my apartment, I was greeted by the familiar sight of whiteboards covered in algorithms and the 3 computer monitors on my desk. This space, unlike the sprawling Westchester estate, felt like home, a place where my values and priorities were reflected in every detail. I kicked off my shoes and checked my email. There were multiple messages from the legal team finalizing acquisition details, a note from our PR director about the upcoming announcement, and a calendar invitation for Monday's all-hands meeting, where we would share the news with our 60-person team. The reality of what was happening, what I had achieved, settled over me like a warm blanket. In less than 48 hours, I would officially be worth $90 million. My technology would reach hundreds of millions of users. The recognition I had never received from my family would come from the industry, from peers who understood the significance of what I'd built. Yet, as I prepared for bed that night, the $10 Starbucks gift card sat on my nightstand, a tangible reminder of the disparity between perception and reality. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about what the gesture represented. A fundamental misunderstanding of who I was and what I had accomplished. Tomorrow would be another day of living between worlds. But soon, very soon, I would need to make a decision about whether to continue this division or to finally reveal the truth. Not just about my financial success, but about the years of subtle diminishment I had accepted in exchange for peace. As I drifted toward sleep, I considered what might happen when my family inevitably discovered the truth. Would the revelation change how they saw me? Would it alter the dynamics that had been established over decades? Or would it simply intensify the patterns, transforming me from the overlooked daughter to the family's new financial resource? The questions followed me into dreams of algorithms and family dinners, Tesla cars and gift cards, $1 million deals and $10 tokens. Somewhere in that contradiction lay the truth of my situation, and the key to whatever would come. Next. Monday morning arrived with the kind of clear September sunshine that made even Brooklyn's industrial landscapes look almost picturesque. I woke at 5, hours before my alarm, my mind already racing with preparations for the day ahead. By 6, I had responded to overnight emails from our legal team, reviewed the final press release for tomorrow's public announcement, and practiced my speech for the all-hands meeting. At 7, I made a deliberate decision. Instead of my usual jeans and Neuralink hoodie, I selected a tailored charcoal suit from the back of my closet, one of only 2 I owned, purchased for investor meetings when projecting the right image was crucial. Today marked a transition point, and I wanted to physically embody that shift when I addressed our team. The Starbucks gift card still sat on my nightstand where I'd left it after the graduation celebration. On impulse, I slipped it into my wallet. A reminder of where I'd come from, even as everything was about to change. My phone rang as I was pouring coffee into a travel mug. Derek's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Morning, Brainiac," he said, sounding surprisingly awake given his celebratory activities the night before. "Did I wake you?" "I've been up for hours," I replied truthfully. "Of course you have," he laughed. "Listen, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about Pasta Royale." I took a deep breath. "Derek, I already told you. Just hear me out," he interrupted. "I know you're on some professor's salary and probably don't have much saved. But what about your retirement account? You could borrow against that. The returns on this investment will more than make up for any penalties." The suggestion was so outrageous that for a moment I couldn't respond. He was proposing I compromise my financial security for his untested business idea, one that followed a string of failures. "That's not possible," I finally said. "Why not? It's your money." "Exactly. It's my money, and I've decided not to invest it in Pasta Royale." There was a pause on the line. "Wow, that's cold, Eliza. After everything our family has done for you." The familiar guilt tactic might once have worked, might have made me question whether I was being selfish or unsupportive. Today, it simply clarified what I already knew. The dynamic wouldn't change unless I changed it. "What exactly has our family done for me, Derek?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Are you serious? Mom and Dad paid for your undergrad, didn't they? They supported you while you were doing all those degrees." "I had academic scholarships for undergrad, and I supported myself through my master's and doctorate with research stipends and teaching assistantships." "Well, they gave you emotional support," he countered, his tone growing defensive. "They came to your graduations. They're proud of you." Yesterday's events flashed in my mind. The contrast between my $10 gift card and his $120,000 car. The dismissive description of my field. The red and white decorations with no acknowledgement of MIT's colors. "I need to go," I said, unwilling to argue further. "I have an important meeting this morning." "Of course you do," Derek scoffed. "Always working, never helping family. Real nice, Eliza." I ended the call before he could continue, my hands shaking slightly with suppressed emotion. The conversation, brief as it was, had crystallized something important. For years, I had accepted a narrative about my place in the family. The less favored child, the one who should be grateful for whatever acknowledgement came her way. I had internalized the idea that my priorities were somehow less valid, my achievements less significant. No more. I arrived at Neuralink's offices by 8, early enough to have the open concept workspace to myself for a while. Our company occupied 2 floors of a renovated factory building in Dumbo, with exposed brick walls and large windows overlooking the Manhattan Bridge. What had started as just me at a desk in my apartment had grown into a team of 60 talented engineers, data scientists, designers, and business specialists. Rajiv arrived at 8:30, also dressed more formally than usual in a navy suit. He handed me a coffee despite the one already on my desk. Figured you could use a second one today, he said, noticing my expression. Everything okay? Acquisition? Nerves? I shook my head. Family stuff. Rajiv nodded, understanding without needing details. Over 4 years of building Neuralink together, he had heard enough about my family dynamics to grasp the fundamentals. Well, in a few hours you'll officially be worth more than your entire extended family combined, he said with a slight smile. That's got to feel good. It's not about the money, I replied automatically. Of course not, but it doesn't hurt. Does it? Rajiv perched on the edge of my desk. So what are you going to do with your share? Besides not investing in your brother's pet spa chain? I smiled despite myself. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. It wasn't entirely true. I had thought about it, just not in terms of purchases or lifestyle changes. I had been focused on what the acquisition meant for our technology, for our team, for the vision we'd been pursuing. The personal wealth aspect had seemed abstract, secondary. Well, you'd better start thinking, Rajiv advised. Once the announcement goes public tomorrow, you'll have financial advisors crawling all over you. Not to mention long-lost relatives suddenly remembering how close you were. The comment hit closer to home than he could have known. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, I said. Let's focus on today. The team deserves to hear the news, before anyone else. As our staff began arriving, the energy in the office built steadily. They knew something significant was happening. The all-hands meeting had been announced Friday with no agenda provided, and there had been enough lawyers and executives coming through over the past weeks to signal major developments. At 10, sharp, I stood before the assembled team in our largest conference room, the windows behind me framing the Manhattan skyline. 60 pairs of eyes watched expectantly as I took a deep breath. 4 years ago, Neuralink began in my apartment with nothing but an algorithm and a vision, I started. Today, I'm incredibly proud to announce that Neuralink is being acquired by Meridian for $90 million. The room erupted in cheers, applause, and a few shocked gasps. Many of our early employees held equity stakes that would translate into life-changing sums. This isn't just a financial transaction, I continued once the noise subsided. Our technology will be integrated across Meridian's platform, reaching over 800 million users worldwide. The adaptive learning algorithms we've pioneered will reshape how people interact with technology on a global scale. I outlined the integration plan, the retention packages for the team, and my own continuing role as Executive Vice President of AI Integration at Meridian. I assured them that everyone's position was secure. In fact, we would be expanding, with additional resources now available for research and development. As the formal presentation concluded and champagne was distributed for a toast, I found myself surrounded by team members offering congratulations and expressing excitement about the future. Their genuine enthusiasm, not just for the financial outcome but for the technological impact we would now have, was deeply validating. Amidst the celebration, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother. Eliza, please call. When you can. Your father and I need to discuss something important with you. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding. Whatever family matter required discussion would have to wait. Today belonged to Neuralink and the team that had made its success possible. The remainder of the day passed in a whirlwind of meetings with Meridian executives, legal document signings, and preparation for tomorrow's public announcement. By 7 in the evening, when most of the team had departed for impromptu celebratory dinners, I finally had a moment to check my messages. 3 more texts from my mother, each increasingly urgent. This is really important, Eliza. Your father is very upset that you haven't called back. Family emergency. Call immediately. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Despite years of emotional manipulation, the word emergency still triggered an automatic response. I called, My mother's number. She answered on the first ring. Finally. Where have you been all day? We've been trying to reach you for hours. I was in meetings, I said, the explanation both true and deliberately vague. What's the emergency? There was a pause, then my mother's voice lowered dramatically. It's your brother. He's in trouble. Of course it was Derek. In my family, emergencies were almost always Derek-centric. What kind of trouble? I asked, bracing myself. Financial trouble. Very serious. Her voice dropped even further. He owes some people money. Gambling debts. They're threatening him. Gambling? Debts? This was new territory even for Derek, whose previous financial issues had been limited to failed business ventures and extravagant personal spending. How much? I asked, already suspecting where this conversation was heading. $75,000, my mother replied, the figure causing me to inhale sharply. Don't tell your father I told you the exact amount. He's embarrassed about the whole situation. Why are you telling me this? I asked, though I knew the answer. Well, we thought. Given that you've been working steadily with that university, position, and your little computer business, maybe you could help your brother out of this situation. It's just a loan, of course. He'll pay you back once Paspa Royale takes off. The audacity was breathtaking. Not only were they asking me to cover Derek's gambling debts with money they assumed I didn't have, but they were still clinging to the fiction that his newest business venture would succeed where all others had failed. Mom, I don't have $75,000, I said. The statement technically true. I had much more, but not accessible until after tomorrow's formal closure of the acquisition. Well, how much do you have? Anything would help. Your father and I are already contributing. But we're stretched thin with helping Derek secure the first PawSpa location. I closed my eyes, processing what I was hearing. They were still funding Derek's business venture while asking me to bail him out of gambling debts. I can't help with this, I said finally. What do you mean you can't help? He's your brother, Eliza. And that entitles him to my money? It's what families do. We help each other. Her voice had risen to the familiar pitch that preceded emotional manipulation. Your father and I have always been there for you. Have you? I asked, surprising myself with the direct challenge. How exactly? What kind of question is that? We raised you. We supported your education. I had scholarships for undergrad and supported myself through graduate school with research stipends and teaching positions, I reminded her, echoing what I'd told Derek earlier. Well, we provided a home, emotional support. Did you, though? I interrupted, years of accumulated grievances pushing to the surface. Do you remember my doctoral dissertation defense? The culmination of 5 years of research? There was a pause. Of course we remember. You and Dad didn't attend, because Derek had a networking event the same day that you thought was more important for his future? You didn't even watch the live stream I set up specifically so you could see it remotely. Eliza, that's ancient history. We're talking about a serious situation happening right now. It's not ancient history to me, Mom. It's a pattern, one of many. I could hear my father's voice in the background asking for the phone. After some muffled conversation, his authoritative tone came through clearly. Eliza, this isn't like you. Your brother is in genuine trouble, and we're asking for your help as a family. Like you helped me yesterday with the Starbucks gift card while giving Derek a Tesla. The words escaped before I could censor them. There was a momentary silence. Is that what this is about? You're jealous of your brother's graduation gift? No, Dad. It's about the fact that you and Mom have consistently prioritized Derek's needs, wants, and failures over my accomplishments, independence, and success. And now you're asking me to sacrifice my financial security to cover his gambling. debts while you continue funding his latest doomed business venture. That's an extremely unfair characterization, my father replied, his lawyer voice emerging. We've supported both our children equally. It's not our fault you chose a less lucrative career path than your brother's entrepreneurial ventures. The irony of his statement hit me like a physical force. Tomorrow morning, news would break of my $90 million acquisition, the result of my less lucrative career path. Meanwhile, Derek's entrepreneurial ventures had produced nothing but debt and repeated failures. For a moment, I was tempted to reveal everything, to tell my father exactly how lucrative my career had become. But the timing wasn't right. Making such an announcement in the heat of this confrontation would only confirm their perception that my worth was tied to my financial value to the family. I need to go, I said instead. I have an early meeting tomorrow. So, that's it? You're refusing to help your brother in his time of need? My father's disappointment was palpable, even through the phone. I'm refusing to be manipulated into covering gambling debts that shouldn't exist in the first place, I clarified. Derek is 30 years old. It's time he faced the consequences of his actions without family bailouts. Who do you think has been paying for your lifestyle all these years? My father roared, his controlled lawyer voice giving way to genuine anger. After everything we've sacrificed for you. The accusation was so disconnected from reality that it momentarily left me speechless. My lifestyle, my modest apartment and decade-old car, the lifestyle I had deliberately maintained while building a multi-million-dollar company? Dad, I've been supporting myself entirely since undergrad, I said once I recovered from the shock of his statement. Any lifestyle I have, I've earned through my own work. Is that so? What about that trust fund from your grandmother, the one that matured when you turned 25? Don't tell me that hasn't been supplementing your income from that struggling startup and part-time teaching. Ah. Now the picture became clearer. My grandmother, my father's mother, had indeed established trust funds for both Derek and me before she passed away. Mine had been designated for educational purposes and had been depleted years ago paying for research materials and conference travel that my graduate stipend hadn't covered. Derek's, meanwhile, had been accessible without restrictions and had been spent within months on luxury purchases and his first failed business venture. That trust fund was used up before I even finished my doctorate, I explained, keeping my voice even. I've been supporting myself through my company's revenue for years. That little computer business barely keeps the lights on, my father scoffed. Your mother and I aren't fools, Eliza. We know what academic positions pay, and we know how difficult it is for startups to survive, let alone provide decent salaries. You may have been contributing to your own upkeep, but don't pretend you haven't been relying on family money. It was pointless to argue further. My parents had constructed a narrative about my financial situation that supported their world view, one where Derek's business ventures were always on the verge of massive success despite requiring constant bailouts, while my steady academic work and little computer business were barely keeping me afloat despite requiring no family support. Tomorrow that narrative would collapse entirely. But tonight, I had no interest in prolonging a conversation based on such fundamental misconceptions. I need to go, I repeated firmly. We can discuss this another time. There won't be another. Time if your brother's kneecaps get broken, my father shouted, resorting to dramatic hyperbole. This is happening now, Eliza. We need to know if you're part of this family or not. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. It was meant to be the ultimate pressure tactic, family loyalty framed as a binary choice, with financial contribution as the only acceptable demonstration of belonging. I've always been part of this family, I replied quietly. The question is whether this family has ever truly been part of my life. Good night, Dad. I ended the call before he could respond, my hand trembling slightly as I set down the phone. A complex mixture of emotions washed over me: anger at the manipulation, sadness at the broken relationship, and something unexpected: relief. For the first time in my adult life, I had directly confronted the family dynamic that had shaped so much of my existence. The office was silent around me, the celebration long since moved to various restaurants and bars across the city. Through the large windows, I could see Manhattan's lights reflecting on the East River as twilight deepened into night. Tomorrow, everything would change. The acquisition would become public knowledge. My financial status would transform overnight. The carefully maintained separation between my professional success and family relationships would collapse. Tonight, though, I had taken the first step in a different kind of transformation, one that had nothing to do with money or professional achievement. I had begun the process of reclaiming my narrative, of challenging the role I had been assigned in my family's hierarchy. As I gathered my things to leave the office, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line read, "Meridian Acquisition, Final Press Release for Approval." The announcement was scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow, to coincide with the market opening. I scanned the document, which detailed the acquisition terms, the integration plans, and included quotes from both Meridian's CEO and me. There was a professional photograph of me included, one taken during our last major product launch, showing me presenting on stage at a tech conference. The press release concluded with a brief biographical section. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, founder and CEO of Neuralink, will join Meridian as Executive Vice President of AI Integration. Dr. Chen holds a PhD in computer science from MIT, specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Under her leadership, Neuralink has developed groundbreaking adaptive learning algorithms that have revolutionized human-computer interaction. I stared at those words for a long moment, contemplating the public recognition that had so long eluded me in private. Tomorrow, the world would know Dr. Elizabeth Chen as a successful tech founder and innovator. But would my family finally see me, truly see me, for who I was and what I had accomplished? The answer to that question remained to be seen. But for the first time, I wasn't defining my worth by their recognition. I had built something valuable entirely on my own terms. Whatever happened next, that achievement couldn't be diminished by anyone's perception, not even my family's. As I left the office and stepped into the cool September evening, I felt lighter somehow, unburdened by the weight of expectations I had carried for so long. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, I had taken the first step toward a new kind of freedom, not from financial constraints, but from the emotional patterns that had constrained me far more powerfully than any economic limitation ever could. Tuesday morning dawned crisp and bright, a perfect fall day in New York City. I had barely slept, my mind alternating between anticipation about the acquisition announcement and replaying the confrontation with my parents. By 6, I had abandoned any pretense of rest and was dressed in my most professional outfit, a tailored navy suit with a silk blouse, preparing for what would undoubtedly be a transformative day. The acquisition announcement was scheduled for 9 a.m., coinciding with the market opening. Our PR team had coordinated with Meridian for a joint press release, followed by a video conference with key technology journalists. By afternoon, the news would be everywhere in the tech industry and financial world. My phone had been unusually quiet since last night's confrontation. No further texts or calls from my parents or Derek. The silence was both a relief and vaguely unsettling, like the stillness before a storm. As I prepared to leave for the office, a text from Rajiv appeared. News already leaking in pre-market trading circles. Meridian stock up 2% on acquisition rumors. Better get here early. I grabbed my laptop bag and headed out, stopping only to collect the newspaper outside my apartment door, a habit I maintained despite consuming most news digitally. The headline that greeted me had nothing to do with technology acquisitions. Gambling ring busted at elite Manhattan club. I might have passed over it entirely if not for a familiar name mentioned in the first paragraph. Montgomery Bechtel III, Derek's former roommate from Cornell and frequent companion in his various escapades. According to the article, several wealthy young professionals had been arrested in connection with an illegal high-stakes gambling operation run out of a private club in Tribeca. Montgomery was quoted as saying he was cooperating fully with authorities. The connection to Derek's sudden gambling debts was too obvious to ignore. I folded the paper into my bag and headed for the subway, my mind fitting pieces together. The timing, the amount, the urgency, it all pointed to Derek being involved in this same gambling ring, perhaps narrowly avoiding arrest himself, but still owing significant money to dangerous people. By 7:30, I was at Neuralink's offices, where an unusual level of activity was already underway. PR team members huddled around monitors tracking early market movements and social media mentions. Legal representatives from both Neuralink and Meridian were reviewing final documents. Rajiv stood in the center of it all, directing various activities while maintaining his characteristic calm demeanor. "There you are," he said as I entered. "Ready for your close-up? CNBC wants you live at 10:30, Bloomberg at 11:15, and the Wall Street Journal Tech Podcast at 2. That's just the beginning." "No pressure," I said with a nervous laugh. "Hey!" Rajiv stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've earned this moment. Every bit of it. 4 years ago, you showed me an algorithm scribbled on a napkin that I barely understood. Today, that idea is worth $90 million and about to change how millions of people interact with technology. Own it." His words steadied me, a reminder of the journey that had led to this moment. Not just the professional achievements, but the personal growth they represented. I had built Neuralink without family connections, without inherited wealth, without even basic emotional support from those who should have been my biggest champions. Whatever happened next, that accomplishment was mine. At precisely 9 a.m., the press release went live across multiple platforms simultaneously. Within minutes, my phone began buzzing with notifications, tech publications breaking the news, LinkedIn congratulations from industry connections, emails from former professors and classmates who recognized my name. The validation was immediate and overwhelming. By 9:30, Meridian stock had risen 4% on the news, adding billions to its market capitalization. Analysts were already praising the strategic acquisition, noting how Neuralink's technology could integrate across Meridian's platform to create more personalized user experiences. At 10 a.m., I stepped into the conference room where a professional backdrop had been set up for the video interviews. As the PR director adjusted my microphone and the tech team finalized camera settings, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. My mother's number. "Can you give me a moment?" I asked the team. They nodded and stepped away, continuing preparations while I answered. "Mom, I'm about to go into a meeting. Can I call you back this afternoon?" "Eliza, have you seen the news?" Her voice was tight with anxiety. "What news?" I asked, though I suspected it related to the gambling bust. "It's about Derek. His friend Monty was arrested last night. Something about illegal gambling. Your brother is beside himself with worry." "Is Derek being charged with anything?" I asked directly. "No, thank goodness, but the people he owes money to, they're dangerous, Eliza. And now, with the police investigation, they're even more desperate to collect. They've given him until the end of the week." I glanced at the PR director, who was signaling that we had 5 minutes until the first live interview. "Mom, I really can't talk about this right now. I have an important meeting." "More important than your brother's safety?" Her voice rose with indignation. Before I could respond, the PR director approached with a tablet displaying a breaking news headline. Meridian acquires AI startup Neuralink for $90 million. Beneath it was my professional photograph alongside a quote about the integration of our technology. I held up a finger indicating I needed 1 more minute. "Mom, I have to go. We can discuss this later today. Eliza, please. Your father and I don't have this kind of money. And the deadline. Ms. Chen? The PR director pointed urgently at her watch. CNBC is ready to connect. I have to go, I repeated firmly. I'll call you after my meetings. I ended the call and turned to the PR team, taking a deep breath to center myself. Whatever family drama was unfolding would have to wait. This moment, this validation of years of work and vision, deserved my full attention. The CNBC interview began with questions about the technology itself, allowing me to explain in clear terms how Neuralink's adaptive learning algorithms would enhance user experiences across Meridian's platform. As the conversation shifted to the business aspects of the acquisition, I navigated questions about valuation and integration plans with the confidence that came from intimate knowledge of both the technology and the deal structure. Dr. Chen, the interviewer said as our time drew to a close, you founded Neuralink just 4 years ago while completing your doctorate at MIT. Did you ever imagine it would grow into a $90 million acquisition in such a short time? I smiled, momentarily transported back to those early days working from my apartment, maxing out credit cards to fund initial development before securing our first venture investment. The focus was always on solving a fundamental problem in human-computer interaction, I replied. When you're passionate about creating something of genuine value, financial outcomes follow naturally. That said, joining forces with Meridian allows us to implement our vision at a scale we could only dream of as an independent startup. As the interview concluded, I checked my phone to find 7 missed calls, 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, and 2 from Derek. There were also multiple text messages, each more urgent than the last. The final one from Derek was simply, "Call me now, it's life or death." Before I could decide how to respond, Rajiv appeared with a tablet displaying a real-time social media feed. Articles about the acquisition were being shared thousands of times across platforms, with tech influencers praising the strategic move. Meridian's stock was now up 6%, and my own name was trending in technology circles. "You're officially tech famous," Rajiv said with a grin. "How does it feel?" "Surreal," I admitted, the truth of it hitting me fully. After years of keeping my professional success separate from my personal life, the walls between those worlds were collapsing rapidly. It was only a matter of time before my family connected Dr. Elizabeth Chen, tech founder with Eliza Chen, their overlooked daughter and sister. As if on cue, my phone began ringing again. Derek's number. With a sigh, I answered, stepping away from the busy preparations for my next interview. "Derek, I'm in the middle of something extremely important. Can I call you back?" "Did you know?" he demanded without preamble, his voice a strange mixture of anger and awe. "Know what?" "Don't play dumb, Eliza. It's all over the news. You sold your company for $90 million, and you had the nerve to lecture me about my finances?" So it had happened. The connection had been made. "I didn't lecture you about your finances," I replied evenly. "I declined to invest in your business venture and refused to cover your gambling debts. Those were boundaries, not lectures." "Boundaries?" Derek's voice rose incredulously. "You're sitting on millions while your own brother is in danger, and you call that boundaries?" "Your poor decisions are not my financial responsibility, regardless of my net worth." There was a momentary silence on the line. When Derek spoke again, his tone had shifted to something more calculated. "Look, I get it. You're still mad about the Tesla thing, and maybe some other stuff over the years. But this is different, Eliza. These guys are serious. They've threatened me. They know where Mom and Dad live." The manipulation was so transparent, it would have been almost comical if it weren't so familiar. Derek had always been skilled at reconceptualizing situations to position himself as the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of his own problems. "What exactly happened with this gambling ring?" I asked directly. Derek hesitated before answering. I got in over my head. Monty introduced me to this private game in Tribeca, high-stakes poker with some serious players. I thought I could win enough to fund Paw Spa Royale without having to rely on Dad or investors. And instead, you lost $75,000 that you didn't have. It wasn't like that at first. I was up nearly 50 grand after the first few sessions. Then I had one bad night, tried to win it back, and things escalated. The PR director was signaling frantically that Bloomberg was waiting to connect. I held up 2 fingers indicating I needed 2 more minutes. Derek, I have to go. I'm literally in the middle of press interviews about the acquisition. So, what about my situation? Are you going to help or not? The question hung between us, loaded with decades of family dynamics and unspoken expectations. In the past, I might have eventually capitulated, accepting the familiar role of accommodating others' needs while minimizing my own boundaries. Today felt different. I'll tell you what, I said, surprising myself with the clarity that emerged. I'll cover your gambling debt on 2 conditions. Name them, Derek said eagerly, clearly not expecting any resistance now that he knew my financial position. First, you enter a gambling addiction program immediately. Today, with verification and regular updates on your progress. I don't have a gambling addiction, he protested. It was just a few bad nights. That's condition 1, non-negotiable. Derek sighed dramatically. Fine. What's the second condition? You accept that this is the absolute last financial bailout you will ever receive from me. No investments in Paw Spa Royale, no covering personal expenses, no emergency loans. This is it. That's harsh, Eliza. We're family. Exactly. And healthy family relationships aren't based on financial exploitation. Do you accept the conditions? Another lengthy pause followed. I accept, he finally said, though his tone suggested reluctance. I'll have the money transferred this afternoon once I have confirmation that you've enrolled in a program. As I ended the call, I noticed Rajiv watching me with a raised eyebrow. Family discovering your new net worth? He asked. Right on schedule, I confirmed, straightening my jacket as we headed toward the next interview setup. And letting the demands begin already, I see. Setting boundaries, I corrected. There's a difference. The Bloomberg interview went smoothly, focusing primarily on the technical aspects of the integration and the market potential for our combined technologies. As I articulated the vision that had driven Neuralink from concept to acquisition, I felt a growing sense of confidence, not just in the professional achievement, but in my ability to navigate the personal complications that were unfolding alongside it. By early afternoon, after completing the Wall Street Journal podcast interview, I finally had a moment to check my messages. Among the congratulatory emails from industry contacts and former colleagues was one from my father, sent just 30 minutes earlier. The subject line was simply, "Discussion needed." The body of the email was brief and formal, his lawyer persona fully engaged. Eliza, we need to have a family meeting regarding recent developments and Derek's situation. Your mother and I propose dinner at our home tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Please confirm your attendance. Dad. No congratulations on the acquisition. No acknowledgement of my professional achievement. Just a summons to discuss developments, and of course Derek's situation. I typed an equally brief reply. I can attend. Dinner tomorrow at 7. I'll bring dessert. Eliza. As I sent the response, I felt a strange sense of calm. Tomorrow's dinner would undoubtedly be challenging, but for the first time in such a family encounter, I would be entering with full awareness of both the dynamics at play and my own worth, professional, financial, and personal. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a whirlwind of additional interviews, team celebrations, and preliminary integration meetings with Meridian executives. By 6 in the evening, When most of the staff had departed for a company-wide celebration dinner, I finally had a moment alone in my office to process the day's events. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Registered for program at Wellness Recovery Center. Sending verification email now. Thank you, sis. I mean it. At least he had followed through on the first condition. I arranged for the funds transfer, explicitly documenting that this constituted full and final financial assistance, with no expectation of repayment, but a firm understanding that no further financial support would be provided regardless of circumstances. As I completed the transaction, I realized that my approach to this situation differed fundamentally from how I would have handled it in the past. Previously, I might have provided the money secretly, without conditions, simultaneously resenting the expectation and seeking approval for my generosity. Now, I was establishing clear boundaries while still offering help, a balanced approach that honored both familial connection and personal limits. The office was quiet as I gathered my things to leave, most of the team already at the restaurant for our celebration dinner. Through the large windows, I could see the lights of Manhattan reflected in the East River, a view that had witnessed Neuralink's evolution from struggling startup to acquisition success. As I prepared to join my team, my office phone rang. An unusual occurrence since most communication happened via mobile or messaging platforms. I hesitated before answering, wary of further family complications. Dr. Chen speaking, I said formally. Elizabeth? It's Margaret Hamilton from MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. I hope I'm not interrupting your celebrations. Dr. Hamilton had been my dissertation advisor and earliest champion of the technologies that eventually became Neuralink's core products. Her belief in my research had sustained me through the most challenging periods of development. Professor Hamilton, not interrupting at all. It's wonderful to hear from you. I've been following the news about Meridian's acquisition. Quite spectacular, though not surprising to those of us who recognize the potential of your work from the beginning. Her words carried a weight that all the press coverage and market validation couldn't match, the professional recognition from someone who understood both the technical innovation and the personal dedication required to achieve it. That means a great deal coming from you, I said sincerely. Well, I didn't call just to congratulate you, though that would be reason enough. She paused briefly. The department is establishing a new endowed chair in adaptive learning technologies, and we'd like to discuss the possibility of naming it after you, with the hope that you might consider serving on our advisory board as well. The offer was unexpected and deeply meaningful. Recognition from the institution that had formed the foundation of my technical expertise and research approach. I'd be honored, I replied, emotion making my voice slightly unsteady. Truly honored. After discussing some preliminary details and arranging a formal meeting for the following week, I ended the call feeling a profound sense of validation. The acknowledgement from MIT represented recognition of my work's academic significance beyond its commercial success, a distinction that resonated deeply with my fundamental values. As I finally left the office to join my team's celebration, I reflected on the stark contrast between my professional recognition and my family's response. The industry, my peers, even my academic mentors had all acknowledged the value of what I had built. My family, meanwhile, had processed the news primarily through the lens of how it might solve Derek's latest crisis. The difference was revealing, not just about them, but about the environment I had created for myself professionally, one where contribution and innovation were valued above appearance or conformity to expectations. I had built a community that recognized what my family could not see, that my worth extended far beyond my utility to others. Tomorrow's dinner with my parents would be a reckoning of sorts, a confrontation between these conflicting value systems. But tonight belonged to celebration with the team that had helped make Neuralink's success possible, people who had believed in the vision when others dismissed it, who had contributed their talents without expectation of recognition above their Peers who had created together something more valuable than any of us could have built alone. As I entered the restaurant where my team had already gathered, their spontaneous applause brought unexpected tears to my eyes. This was what real recognition felt like. Authentic appreciation from people who understood both the journey and the achievement. Taking my place at the center of the celebration, I raised a glass to toast not just our financial success, but the more meaningful victory, creating technology that would genuinely improve people's lives while building a culture that valued each contributor's unique gifts. To Neuralink, I said, surveying the faces of the people who had made this moment possible. And to each of you who believed enough to make it real. As glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, I felt a sense of belonging more profound than anything I had experienced in family gatherings. Here, among colleagues who had become friends and collaborators who had become a community, I was valued not for what I could provide, but for who I was, a leader, an innovator, a person of worth, beyond measure. Tomorrow would bring its challenges with family dynamics and long-established patterns. But tonight had already provided the most important reminder. I had built something of value, both in my company and in myself. Whatever happened at tomorrow's dinner, that fundamental truth couldn't be diminished by anyone's perception, not even my family's. The day after the acquisition announcement passed in a blur of meetings with Meridian's integration team, congratulatory calls from industry leaders, and planning sessions for my transition to executive vice president. By late afternoon, I was mentally preparing for the family dinner that evening, a confrontation I both dreaded and, surprisingly, anticipated with a strange sense of resolve. I left the office earlier than usual, wanting time to decompress before entering the emotional labyrinth of my parents' home. On the drive to Westchester, I reflected on how dramatically my professional life had transformed in just 48 hours. The acquisition had been covered by every major business publication. Meridian's stock had closed up 5% from Monday's price, adding billions to its market capitalization based largely on analyst enthusiasm for our technology integration. I had received emails from tech leaders I'd admired for years, congratulating me and expressing interest in potential collaborations. Yet none of those external validations had affected me as deeply as the internal shift that had occurred. A fundamental realignment of how I perceived my own worth, independent of others' recognition or approval. The professional achievement had catalyzed a personal transformation that had been building for years, perhaps decades. As I turned onto the familiar tree-lined street where I had grown up, I felt neither the anxiety that usually accompanied family visits, nor the desperate hope for approval that had characterized my younger years. Instead, I experienced a calm, clarity about both the dynamics I was about to encounter and my own boundaries within them. My parents' house looked exactly as it always had, a stately colonial with perfectly manicured grounds that projected exactly the image they valued. Successful, established, traditional. I parked my aging Honda behind Derek's new Tesla, the contrast between our vehicles no longer a source of embarrassment, but simply an observation about different priorities. Before exiting the car, I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I had deliberately chosen an outfit that bridged my professional and personal identities, a simple but elegant dress that projected confidence without ostentation. Around my neck hung a small pendant given to me by my grandmother before she passed away, a reminder of the one family member who had truly seen and valued me for who I was rather than who she wanted me to be. Taking a deep breath, I gathered the bakery box containing the dessert I had promised and approached the front door. Before I could ring the bell, it swung open to reveal my mother, her expression a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. "Eliza," she said, stepping back to allow me entry. "We've been waiting." The formal living room was set for dinner, the good china and crystal glasses indicating the occasion's perceived importance. My father stood by the fireplace, drink in hand, his posture rigid with the controlled tension I recognized from childhood confrontations. Derek sat on the sofa, looking uncharacteristically subdued. His usual bravado diminished in the aftermath of his gambling crisis and subsequent forced entry into a recovery program. "Dr. Chen arrives," my father said, the formality and slight emphasis on my title containing both acknowledgement and accusation. "Quite the celebrity now, aren't you?" "Hardly," I replied, setting the dessert box on the sideboard. "The acquisition is significant in tech circles, but I'm far from a household name." "Your name has been all over our social feeds," my mother interjected. "The Andersons called yesterday to ask if you were our Eliza. The Warrens sent an email. Even your father's golf partners mentioned seeing you on CNBC. The subtext was clear. My sudden visibility had impacted their social standing, forcing a hasty recalibration of the narrative they had constructed about their children's relative success. "Congratulations on your business success," my father said, the words correct, but the tone perfunctory. Though I must say, we were surprised to learn about it from news outlets rather than from you directly. And there it was, the first attempt to position my professional achievement as a familial failing on my part. "Thank you," I replied simply. "Shall we sit down to dinner? I'm happy to answer questions about the acquisition over the meal." My mother nodded and led us to the dining room, where she had prepared what appeared to be an elaborate meal, significantly more sophisticated than the usual family dinner, another sign of the evening's perceived importance. As we took our seats, my parents at opposite ends of the table, Derek and me facing each other across its width, an awkward silence descended. My mother broke it by serving the first course, a butternut squash soup that steamed elegantly in bone china bowls. "So," my father began once we had all been served, $90 million. That's quite a figure for a little computer business." I met his gaze directly. Neuralink stopped being a little computer business years ago. We've been developing industry-leading AI technology with venture backing since our second year. "And you never thought to mention this development?" my mother asked, her tone suggesting I had deliberately withheld critical family information. "I mentioned my company at every family gathering," I reminded her. The responses were consistently dismissive. "That little startup thing? Is it still going?" was your exact question at my graduation dinner. My mother had the grace to look momentarily discomfited. "Well, you never indicated it was successful." Would that have mattered? Would my work have suddenly become interesting if you knew it was financially valuable? The directness of my question created another uncomfortable silence, broken only by the sound of spoons against china as we continued with the soup course. Derek cleared his throat. "I want to thank you again for helping with my, situation. The program is intense but good. 3 days in and I'm already learning a lot about the psychological patterns behind addiction." His gratitude seemed genuine, though I noted he still avoided directly naming his gambling problem, describing it only as his situation. "I'm glad you're taking it seriously," I replied. "How's the first Pas Spa Royale location progressing?" The question was deliberate, designed to bring the family's financial prioritization into the open. Derek glanced at our father before responding. "We've decided to put that on hold temporarily, given the circumstances." My father sat down, his spoon with a sharp click against the bowl. "Let's address the elephant in the room, shall we? Eliza, your sudden financial success raises some important family considerations." "What considerations would those be?" I asked, though I already anticipated the direction of his thoughts. "Family resources should be managed strategically," he said, slipping into his corporate attorney persona. "Now that we understand your financial position, it seems appropriate to reassess how assets are distributed within the family unit." The clinical phrasing barely disguised the underlying message. My newfound wealth should now be considered a family resource under his strategic management. I wasn't aware that individual professional success automatically converted personal Assets into family resources, I replied evenly. Is that a principle that applies to everyone at this table? My father's expression tightened. You've always had a tendency to overcomplicate straightforward matters, Eliza. Family helps family. That's the fundamental principle here. I agree completely, I said, surprising him with my apparent concession. Family should help family. That's why I've provided the funds to resolve Derek's gambling debts, with conditions designed to help him address the underlying issue rather than merely treating the symptom. Yes, and we appreciate that, my mother interjected quickly. But your father is talking about a more comprehensive approach to family financial planning now that circumstances have changed. As my mother served the main course, roast duck, with orange sauce, a dish reserved for what she considered important occasions, I carefully considered my response. The conversation had arrived at exactly the juncture I had anticipated, offering an opportunity to address decades of unbalanced family dynamics. I'm curious, I said, cutting a small piece of duck, about how this comprehensive approach to family financial planning applied when Derek received his trust fund, or when he received multiple investments for his business ventures over the years. That was different, my father replied immediately. Your brother was launching entrepreneurial ventures that required capital investment. You were pursuing academic work with limited financial potential. I nodded, taking a deliberate sip of water before responding. And that assessment of financial potential was based on what evidence exactly? It's common knowledge that academic careers are less lucrative than business ventures, my mother offered, as if explaining something obvious to a child, even when those business ventures consistently failed while the academic work led to a $90 million acquisition. The question hung in the air, unanswerable without acknowledging the flawed assumptions that had guided their decision-making for years. Derek, uncharacteristically, broke the tense silence. They didn't know your work would be valuable, Eliza. None of us did. You kept it quiet. Did I? I looked directly at him. Or did you simply never ask? In the past 5 years, how many times have any of you inquired about the specifics of my research or business beyond the most superficial questions? How many times did conversations about my work end with dismissive comments or quick transitions to topics deemed more interesting? Usually your latest venture, Derek? My mother set down her fork. This isn't productive, Eliza. We're trying to have a constructive conversation about family financial planning, not excavate perceived slights from the past. They're not perceived slights, Mom. They're documented patterns of behavior that directly relate to the current conversation. I turned back to my father. You mentioned strategic management of family resources. I'd like to understand exactly what you're proposing. My father straightened in his chair, clearly relieved to move toward what he considered the substantive discussion. Given your significant liquidity event, it makes sense to establish a family investment structure. I've spoken with my estate planning colleagues, and they recommend creating a family office to manage shared assets, make strategic investments, and provide for various family needs as they arise. And who would control this family office? I asked, already knowing the answer. I would serve as the primary trustee, of course, with your mother as secondary. You and Derek would be beneficiaries with certain voting rights on major decisions. The proposal was exactly as I had expected, a mechanism to bring my assets under my father's control while maintaining the appearance of shared family resources. The certain voting rights would undoubtedly be structured to ensure I could be outvoted on any significant decision. That's an interesting proposal, I said carefully. I have a counter-proposal to offer. My father's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly not having anticipated an alternative framework. I propose that each adult member of this family maintains independent control of their own earned assets, with transparent communication about genuine needs that might warrant support from other family members. Each request for support would be considered individually based on its merits, the requester's demonstrated responsibility, and the potential for sustainable improvement rather than temporary relief. That's not a family office structure, my father objected. That's just individual decision-making. Exactly, I confirmed. Individual adults making independent financial decisions while maintaining the option to support family members when appropriate, based on genuine need rather than entitlement. My mother looked genuinely confused. But why would you want to manage everything separately when we could pool resources for greater efficiency? Because pooling resources in this context means placing my assets under Dad's control for distribution. According to his assessment of family priorities that have historically favored Derek's ventures regardless of their viability. That's an unfair characterization, my father said sharply. Is it? Let's examine the evidence. I set down my utensils and looked directly at him. When Derek's water bottle company failed after 6 months, you covered his losses and immediately funded his cryptocurrency venture despite numerous experts warning about market volatility. When that collapsed, you funded his luxury pet spa concept without requiring a business plan or market research. Those were calculated business risks, my father insisted. That's how entrepreneurship works. And yet, when I was developing the initial algorithms for Neuralink and mentioned needing computing resources, you suggested I find a university grant rather than waste family money on theoretical projects. My father's face flushed with the memory. The circumstances were different. Yes, they were. The primary difference was that you valued what you understood, Derek's conventional business ventures, and dismissed what you didn't, my technological innovation. That bias informed your financial support decisions consistently, for years. This is exactly why strategic family planning makes sense, my mother interjected, to ensure more balanced distribution moving forward. The imbalance wasn't due to lack of strategy, Mom. It was due to fundamental value judgments about whose work deserved support. Creating a family office wouldn't address that bias. It would institutionalize it. Derek, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout this exchange, finally spoke. So you're just going to keep your millions to yourself while the rest of us struggle? Is that your idea of family? I turned to face him directly. Derek, I just transferred $75,000 to cover gambling debts you accumulated, trying to fund a business that had no clear market validation. That doesn't align with any definition of keeping my millions to myself. One emergency payment doesn't— It's not just one payment, I interrupted. It's a pattern I'm refusing to enter. The pattern where my success becomes a family resource, while your failures remain individual learning experiences funded by family support. The pattern where my achievements are minimized while your potential is perpetually centered. My father pushed his plate away, his expression hardening. I think we're getting off track here. The question is simple. Are you willing to participate in a family financial structure? Or are you choosing to separate yourself from this family's cooperative approach? The framing was classic manipulation, positioning reasonable boundaries as family rejection. In the past, this tactic had been remarkably effective in generating guilt and eventual compliance. Tonight, it simply clarified the dynamics at play. I'm choosing to relate to my family as an independent adult rather than as a financial resource, I replied calmly. I'm happy to consider specific requests for support based on demonstrated need and responsible planning. I'm not willing to place my assets under centralized family control. After everything we've done for you, my mother began, her voice taking on the wounded tone that had often preceded emotional manipulation in the past. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, the directness of the question causing her to blink in surprise. We raised you, she replied automatically. We provided a home, education, opportunities. My education was funded by scholarships and my own work as a teaching assistant. My professional opportunities came through academic mentors and my own research. My current success was built without family connections or financial support. We gave you emotional support, my father insisted. Did you? I met his gaze steadily. When I defended my doctoral dissertation, the culmination of 5 years of research, neither of you attended because Derek had a networking event the same day. When I secured my first major funding round, Mom asked if this meant I would finally get a real job. When I published research that was cited by leaders in my field, Dad warned me not to get too theoretical at the expense of practical skills. A heavy silence followed these specific examples, impossible to dismiss as perceived slights. We didn't understand your work, my mother finally said, her voice smaller than before. We still don't, really. Understanding wasn't required for support, I replied gently, some of my anger dissolving at her momentary vulnerability. You didn't need to comprehend the technical details of my research to acknowledge its importance to me, to show up for significant moments to express curiosity rather than dismissal. Another silence followed, less tense than confrontational, more contemplative as my words gradually penetrated years of entrenched perspectives. Derek broke the silence unexpectedly. She's right, he said quietly. 3 heads turned toward you. Him in surprise. About what? My father asked sharply. About how differently we've been treated. Derek set down his napkin and looked directly at me. I never saw it before because I benefited from it. But sitting in group therapy sessions these past few days, listening to people talk about enabling behaviors, it's made me see patterns I never noticed. My mother looked alarmed. Derek, I don't think this is the appropriate... It's exactly the appropriate time, Mom, he interrupted with uncharacteristic firmness. Every time I failed, you and Dad cushioned my fall and immediately funded my next venture without question. Meanwhile, Eliza succeeded repeatedly with minimal acknowledgement and zero support. I never had to develop resilience or true self-reliance, because I knew family resources would always be available regardless of my choices. His insight, clearly influenced by the intensive therapy of the recovery program, surprised me deeply. I had never expected Derek to recognize, let alone articulate, the imbalanced dynamics that had shaped both our lives. That's an oversimplification, my father began, but Derek continued. Is it? Look at Sunday's graduation dinner. I got a Tesla for completing an MBA with barely passing grades. Eliza got a gift card for earning a doctorate and building a company apparently worth $90 million. How does that make any sense? My mother appeared genuinely distressed by this unexpected alliance between her children. We've always wanted the best for both of you, she said, her voice unsteady. I believe that, I said, softening my tone. But wanting the best for someone and actually seeing them for who they are, those are different things. You wanted the best for the daughter you wished you had, the one who would follow a conventional path you could understand and appreciate. You struggled to value the actual daughter sitting at your table. My father, clearly uncomfortable with both the direction of the conversation and his loss of control over it, made one final attempt to redirect to his original agenda. This philosophical discussion doesn't address the practical matter at hand. Eliza, will you participate in a family office structure or not? I've already answered that question, I replied. No, I won't participate in a centralized family financial structure. Yes, I will consider specific support requests based on demonstrated need and responsible planning. Those are my boundaries. And if we consider those terms unacceptable? He challenged. I met his gaze directly. Then you'll need to decide whether a relationship with your daughter is valuable enough to respect her boundaries, or whether access to her financial resources is your higher priority. The starkness of this framing clearly shocked him. For, perhaps the first time in our relationship, I had named the underlying dynamic without cushioning it in socially acceptable ambiguity. Derek, continuing his unexpected role as ally, broke the tense silence. Dad, she's being reasonable. More than reasonable. considering she just covered my gambling debts with no expectation of repayment. Maybe we should listen instead of trying, to control the situation. My father looked between us, visibly recalibrating in the face of this unprecedented united front. My mother, meanwhile, had grown uncharacteristically quiet, her expression suggesting she was processing the conversation at a deeper level than her initial defensive responses indicated. "Perhaps we should move on to dessert," she finally suggested, an old diversionary tactic that nonetheless offered a welcome pause in the intensity of the discussion. As my mother served the chocolate cake I had brought, the atmosphere shifted subtly. The confrontation phase appeared to be concluding, giving way to a tentative recalibration of family dynamics. No one was quite sure how to proceed in this new territory where long-established patterns had been explicitly named and challenged. "Tell us about your company," my mother said after serving the cake. "What exactly does it do?" In terms a non-technical person might understand. The question, simple as it was, represented something significant. Perhaps the first genuine expression of interest in my work that wasn't immediately tied to its financial implications for the family. Neuralink develops adaptive learning algorithms. I began, consciously using accessible language without diluting the technical substance. Essentially, we've created AI systems that learn how individual users process information and then adjust digital interfaces to match their cognitive patterns. "Like personalized websites?" Derek asked, also making an effort to engage genuinely. "More sophisticated than that. The technology observes how you interact with digital systems, where your attention focuses, what presentation styles you respond to, what information sequences make intuitive sense to your specific cognitive framework, and then dynamically reconstructs interfaces to optimize for your learning and processing style." And Meridian saw the value in this for their social media platform, my father said, demonstrating he had actually read some of the acquisition coverage. I nodded. "Their platform reaches hundreds of millions of users daily. Integrating our technology will allow them to deliver more engaging, intuitive experiences tailored to each user's cognitive patterns. Information becomes more accessible, communication more effective, engagement more meaningful." "That sounds genuinely important," my mother said, surprise evident in her tone. "It is," I confirmed without arrogance. "The potential applications extend far beyond social media, educational systems, professional training, clinical therapeutic tools. Any context where information processing matters could be transformed by truly adaptive interfaces." For the first time in my adult life, I found myself explaining my work to my family and receiving actual engagement rather than polite disinterest. The questions that followed were basic but sincere. How did we develop the technology? How would the integration with Meridian work? What would my new role involve? As we finished dessert and moved to the living room with coffee, the conversation continued along this newly established channel of genuine interest. The earlier tension hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had been acknowledged and named in ways that made its continued dominance less inevitable. When the evening finally drew to a close around 11, my mother walked me to the door while my father and Derek remained in the living room. "This wasn't the dinner any of us expected," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "But maybe it was the dinner we needed." She hesitated, then asked with uncharacteristic directness, "Have we really been so blind to your achievements all these years?" The question contained a vulnerability I'd rarely witnessed from her, an actual openness to perspectives that challenged her established narrative. "Not blind," I replied carefully. "Just focused elsewhere. You saw what you were looking for, achievements that matched your expectations. Mine simply didn't fit the template." She nodded slowly, absorbing this without immediate denial. "And now?" "Now we have an opportunity to see each other more clearly, all of us." That doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending patterns don't exist. It means acknowledging them honestly and deciding whether we want to perpetuate them or create something different moving forward. As I drove back to the city that night, I reflected on the evening's unexpected developments. The conversation hadn't resolved everything. Deep-seated family dynamics rarely transform in a single encounter. But something fundamental had shifted. Patterns had been named, boundaries had been established, perspectives had been challenged. Most significantly, I had entered my parents' home not as the perpetually overlooked daughter seeking validation, but as a woman fully cognizant of her own worth, professional, financial, and personal. That internal shift had altered the entire family dynamic more powerfully than the external news of my financial success. The $90 million acquisition had created the conditions for this confrontation, but the true transformation had nothing to do with money. It centered on something far more valuable: the reclamation of my narrative, the establishment of healthy boundaries, and the courage to exist in my family not as I had been cast, but as I actually was. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: integration, meetings at Meridian, decisions about my future living arrangements, continued navigation of evolving family dynamics. But tonight had demonstrated something essential: that recognition of worth begins internally, not externally. That validation, when it finally comes from others, matters only because it confirms what you already know to be true about yourself. As I entered my apartment, the modest space that had witnessed both Neuralink's creation and my own personal evolution, I felt neither the euphoria of victory nor the exhaustion of conflict, but something more sustainable: the quiet confidence that comes from standing firmly in your truth and allowing others to adjust their perceptions accordingly. The $10 Starbucks gift card still sat on my nightstand, where I had left it that morning. Looking at it now, I felt no resentment, just a recognition of its place in a story that had finally been acknowledged. A story not of family oversight, but of personal triumph against the subtle undermining of self-worth that so many experience. Tomorrow, I would use that gift card to buy coffee for a young woman I had been mentoring, a brilliant computer science student facing her own struggles for recognition. I would tell her my story not as a tale of family grievance, but as evidence that external validation, while gratifying when it finally arrives, must never be the foundation of your understanding of your own worth. The true wealth I had accumulated had nothing to do with the acquisition figure that had dominated headlines. It lay in the journey from seeking others' approval to knowing my own value, a transformation more valuable than any financial transaction could ever be. The weeks following the acquisition and family confrontation unfolded in a series of deliberate transitions. As October arrived with its crisp air and changing leaves, I found myself navigating multiple transformations simultaneously: professional, personal, and familial, each requiring intentional attention and careful management. At Meridian, the integration process accelerated as our technology began its implementation across their platform. My new role as Executive Vice President of AI Integration involved strategic leadership rather than day-to-day management, allowing me to focus on the broader vision while Rajiv directed the operational aspects of bringing our teams together. The initial market enthusiasm had proven justified as early implementation metrics showed significant improvements in user engagement across test segments. In my personal life, I finally acknowledged that my modest Brooklyn apartment no longer aligned with my current circumstances. After careful consideration, I purchased a spacious loft in a historic building in Tribeca, a property that reflected my aesthetic sensibilities and professional status without excessive ostentation. The open floor plan accommodated both comfortable living spaces and a home office where I could continue development work independent of my Meridian responsibilities. I also finally replaced my aging Honda with a mid-range electric vehicle, practical, environmentally conscious, and appropriately reflective of my values. These changes represented not capitulation to external expectations, but authentic alignment between my circumstances and preferences, now that financial constraints had been removed. The most complex transformation, however, occurred in my family, relationships. The dinner confrontation had catalyzed changes that continued to unfold in sometimes unexpected ways. Derek had remained in the gambling recovery program, engaging with the process more seriously than any of us had anticipated. My parents' responses had diverged, my mother making tentative efforts toward genuine connection while my father maintained a more reserved stance, clearly still processing the fundamental challenge to his authority and perspective. 3 weeks after the dinner, I received an unexpected call from Derek while reviewing integration documentation in my new home office. "Are you busy?" he asked when I answered, his tone lacking the entitled assumption that had characterized so many previous calls. "I have a few minutes," I replied, setting aside the technical specifications I'd been studying. "How's the recovery program going?" "Actually, that's why I'm calling. I'm working on the amends step, and I'd like to meet with you in person, to apologize properly." The request surprised me. Though our conversation at the family dinner had suggested evolving awareness on his part, I hadn't expected such a formal acknowledgement of past behavior patterns. "Of course," I agreed. "When were you thinking? Would tomorrow work? Maybe coffee somewhere near your office?" We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near Meridian's headquarters the following afternoon. After ending the call, I sat for a moment, contemplating this development. The recovery program appeared to be affecting Derek more profoundly than simply addressing his gambling behavior. It seemed to be prompting broader reflection on his life patterns and relationships. The next day, I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early, selecting a table in a quiet corner that would allow private conversation. Derek arrived precisely on time, itself a notable change from his habitual lateness, dressed more simply than his usual carefully cultivated business casual style. He seemed slightly nervous as he approached, lacking the overconfident manner that had been his social armor for as long as I could remember. "Thanks for meeting me," he said as he sat down across from me. "I appreciate you making time." After ordering coffee, Derek pulled a small notebook from his pocket and opened it, revealing handwritten notes. The deliberateness of his preparation struck me as significant, another departure from his typically improvisational approach to personal interactions. "So, I've been doing this program for about a month now," he began, his voice steady despite obvious discomfort. "It's been intense, not just about the gambling, but about the patterns that led to it, the need for external validation, the avoidance of responsibility, the expectation that others would always clean up my messes." I nodded, allowing him space to continue without interruption. "Part of the recovery process involves making amends to people you've harmed, not just apologizing, but actually acknowledging specific behaviors and their impact." He glanced at his notes. "You're at the top of my list, Eliza. I've taken advantage of your generosity, dismissed your achievements, and generally treated you as less important than myself for most of our adult lives." The directness of his acknowledgement was unexpected and genuinely moving. Derek had always excelled at charm and deflection. This straightforward acceptance of responsibility represented significant personal growth. "I spent a lot of time thinking about the specific instances," he continued. "Like when I asked you to help me with college applications and then took full credit for the essays you practically rewrote. Or when I borrowed money from you during grad school but spent it on skiing trips while claiming it was for textbooks. Or, more recently, expecting you to bail me out of gambling debts while I was simultaneously dismissing your work as unimportant." He looked up from his notes, meeting my gaze directly. "The list is actually much longer, but those are some examples that show the pattern. I've consistently treated you as a resource rather than a person with your own legitimate priorities and boundaries. And I'm genuinely sorry for that pattern of behavior." The apology contained everything an effective amends should: specific, acknowledgement of behavior patterns, recognition of their impact, and genuine remorse without expectation of specific response. It reflected both the structural elements of a recovery program and what appeared to be authentic personal insight. "Thank you for saying that," I replied after a moment. "I appreciate both the acknowledgement and what I suspect was the difficult self-reflection behind it." Derek nodded, seemingly relieved by my reception but not rushing to acceptance. "The program emphasizes that making amends isn't about being forgiven. It's about taking responsibility and committing to changed behavior. Moving forward. I want you to know that I'm working on building a different kind of relationship with everyone in my life, including you, one based on mutual respect rather than what I can get from people." "That's a significant shift," I observed. "What prompted it beyond the structured recovery program?" Derek considered the question carefully before responding. "Hitting rock bottom with the gambling was part of it. But honestly, seeing you stand your ground at that family dinner, it was like watching someone step out of a role I'd never questioned. It made me wonder about the roles I've been playing without examination." Our conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, moving beyond the formal amends into a deeper discussion about our childhood, our different experiences of the same family, dynamics, and our individual journeys toward authentic identity. For perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, we engaged as equals, neither competing for parental attention nor playing out established familial patterns. As our meeting concluded, Derek mentioned that he had secured a position as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit organization focusing on financial literacy for young adults. The role represented a significant step down in prestige from his previous business aspirations, but aligned with his emerging understanding of meaningful contribution. "It doesn't pay much," he admitted, "and it's entry-level despite my MBA. But it feels honest in a way my previous ventures never did. Like I'm building something based on actual value rather than appearance or expectation." This shift in perspective, from chasing status to seeking authentic contribution, suggested that Derek's transformation extended beyond merely addressing his gambling addiction to encompass a fundamental reevaluation of his values and priorities. The following week brought another unexpected family development, when my mother called to invite me to lunch, just the two of us, a rare occurrence in our relationship history. "I've been doing some thinking since our dinner conversation," she said when we met at a restaurant halfway between her Westchester home and my Manhattan office, "about what you said regarding never really seeing you for who you are." She seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, her usual social confidence diminished by genuine self-reflection. "I've been trying to understand how that happened, how I could have missed so much about my own daughter's achievements and character." Rather than immediately reassuring her, as would have been my automatic response in the past, I allowed space for her reflection to continue. This pause, this resistance to my habitual caretaking of others' emotions at the expense of my own truth, represented its own small but significant personal evolution. "I think," she continued after a moment, "that I projected onto you all the limitations I had internalized about myself. I was raised to believe that a woman's primary value came from social relationships and family roles, rather than professional achievement. When you showed aptitude in areas I had been taught to consider masculine domains like mathematics and computer science, I didn't know how to value those gifts properly." The insight surprised me, not just its content, but the depth of self-awareness it reflected. My mother had rarely demonstrated this level of introspection about her own conditioning and its impact on her parenting. "That makes sense," I acknowledged, though understanding the origin doesn't necessarily diminish the impact. "No, it doesn't," she agreed readily. "And I'm not offering it as an excuse, just as context for a pattern I'm only now beginning to recognize. I failed to celebrate your intelligence and determination because they manifested in ways that challenged my own limited understanding of female achievement. I focused on Derek's endeavors because they aligned with values I had been taught to prioritize: social connections, business ventures, conventional definitions of success. Her willingness to acknowledge these patterns without defensive qualifications suggested a genuine evolution in her perspective, one that created potential for a more authentic relationship moving forward. "I'd like to understand your work better," she said, signaling another shift from past interactions. "Not just because it's financially successful now, but because it's important to you and because it matters in the world. Would you be willing to help me learn, even though I don't have the technical background to understand all the details?" The request represented exactly the kind of engagement I had longed for throughout my educational and professional journey. Not technical comprehension, but genuine interest in understanding the value and purpose of my work. We spent the remainder of our lunch with me explaining the fundamentals of adaptive learning algorithms and their potential applications in accessible language, while my mother asked thoughtful questions focused on impact rather than technical specifications. As our lunch concluded, she reached across the table to briefly touch my hand, a rare gesture of physical affection in our typically reserved relationship. "I'm proud of what you've built, Eliza, not because of its financial value, but because of the vision and persistence it represents. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." The acknowledgement, simple as it was, addressed a core wound in our relationship: my mother's persistent inability to recognize achievement that didn't conform to her preconceived templates of success. Her willingness to expand those templates represented significant growth on her part and created possibility for a more authentic connection moving forward. My father's evolution proved more complex and gradual. Unlike my mother and brother, whose transformations manifested in direct conversations and explicit acknowledgments, my father's shift emerged through subtle changes in interaction patterns, rather than overt discussions. 2 months after the confrontational dinner, he called with an unexpected request. "I'd like to visit your office at Meridian, if that wouldn't be disruptive. To see what you've built and understand more about this technology everyone's talking about." The invitation reflected both personal interest and practical acknowledgement of my professional standing, a combination that suggested evolving perspective, even without explicit apology or acknowledgement of past dismissal. When he visited the following week, I arranged a comprehensive tour of our development facilities and demonstration of the technology's applications across various contexts. Throughout the visit, my father asked increasingly substantive questions, gradually shifting from surface-level inquiries about business metrics to deeper exploration of the technology's underlying principles and potential impact. "This is genuinely impressive," he acknowledged as we concluded the tour in my office overlooking the Manhattan skyline. "Not just commercially viable, but fundamentally innovative. You've created something that changes how people interact with information." Coming from my father, whose professional life had centered on established legal frameworks rather than technological innovation, this recognition represented significant expansion of his value system. He was acknowledging merit in domains previously outside his personal framework of achievement. "I've been thinking about what you said at dinner," he continued, somewhat awkwardly but with evident sincerity, "about us valuing what we understood and dismissing what we didn't. There's some truth in that assessment that I've been reluctant to acknowledge." The admission, limited as it was, represented meaningful growth for a man whose personal identity had been substantially built around authoritative certainty rather than reflective reconsideration. He wasn't dramatically transforming overnight, but he was demonstrating capacity for evolution previously unexhibited. "I appreciate you coming to see the work firsthand," I replied, acknowledging his effort without minimizing the history it was beginning to address. Our conversation shifted to more neutral professional topics: integration challenges, management transitions, strategic considerations for the technology's implementation across different market segments. These discussions, conducted as conversations between professional equals rather than parent and child, established a new interaction template that honored both our familial connection and our independent professional identities. As my father prepared to leave, he paused at the door of my office. "Your grandmother would have been proud," he said, referencing his mother whose trust fund had supported my early education. "She always said you had a unique way of seeing patterns others missed." I didn't fully understand what she meant until today. The comment connected my current success to family history in a way that acknowledged continuity without claiming credit, recognizing inherited aptitude without diminishing individual achievement. It represented a small but meaningful step toward a more balanced understanding of the relationship between family support and personal accomplishment. These evolving family dynamics unfolded against the backdrop of significant professional transitions as Neuralink's integration with Meridian progressed from technical implementation to market deployment. 6 months after the acquisition, our technology had been successfully incorporated across approximately 40% of Meridian's platform, with user engagement metrics showing substantial improvements in the integrated segments. The professional success brought increased visibility, including profile pieces in major technology publications and speaking invitations at prestigious industry conferences. Unlike earlier in my career, when I had actively avoided publicity to maintain separation between my professional and personal lives, I now selectively engaged with these opportunities, sharing our technology's vision and applications while maintaining appropriate boundaries around personal details. This balanced approach to public professional identity reflected my evolving relationship with visibility and recognition. I no longer needed to hide my success to protect myself from family expectations, nor did I need external validation to confirm my worth. I could engage authentically from a centered position of self-knowledge and clear boundaries. Perhaps the most meaningful moment in this period of multiple transformations occurred during a small celebration, marking the successful completion of the first major phase of integration. The Meridian CEO had arranged a private dinner for the key team members from both companies who had made the technical implementation possible. Midway through the evening, he raised his glass in a toast to Dr. Chen and the Neuralink team, whose vision has transformed not just our platform, but our understanding of what technology can achieve when it truly adapts to human cognition rather than forcing humans to adapt to technology. The recognition, coming from a respected industry leader in front of the peers who had contributed to the achievement, struck a perfect balance, acknowledging my leadership while honoring the collaborative nature of the work. It represented the kind of validation that matters most, recognition of genuine contribution from those who truly understand its significance. As I acknowledged the toast and offered my own appreciation to the combined team that had made the integration successful, I experienced a moment of profound clarity about the nature of true recognition. The validation that actually matters doesn't come from those who love us out of obligation, but from those who understand our work through shared expertise and commitment. It emerges not from familial expectation, but from genuine appreciation of demonstrated value. This realization didn't diminish the importance of my evolving family relationships. The growing authenticity in those connections represented meaningful personal healing and created potential for more balanced interaction moving forward. But it clarified that family validation, while emotionally significant, need not serve as the primary source of self-worth or achievement recognition. The most sustainable foundation for self-valuation comes from internal clarity about personal contribution, reinforced by informed recognition from those who genuinely understand the domain of achievement. This balanced perspective, neither rejecting family connection nor requiring family validation, represented perhaps the most significant transformation in my relationship with recognition and worth. This clarity manifested in practical ways as I established new patterns of family interaction in the months following our confrontational dinner. I maintained regular contact with my mother, whose genuine efforts to engage with my professional identity created foundation for evolving connection. I developed a more authentic relationship with Derek, based on mutual respect rather than established family roles. I engaged with my father through periodic professional discussions that honored both our familial connection and our independent expertise. Most importantly, I maintained clear boundaries around financial expectations and dependency patterns. When Derek completed his recovery program's initial phase and mentioned interest in returning to school for counseling certification, I offered to cover his tuition, a focused investment in genuine growth rather than another bailout of questionable ventures. When my parents mentioned challenges with unexpected home repairs, I contributed without allowing the situation to evolve into ongoing support expectations. These balanced decisions, neither withholding support when genuinely appropriate, nor allowing exploitation of my resources, reflected the sustainable middle path between complete separation and enmeshed dependency. They honored family connection while maintaining appropriate boundaries around individual responsibility and autonomy. 9 months after the acquisition announcement, I received an unexpected email from Professor Hamilton at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. The endowed chair discussion had evolved into a more specific opportunity, a visiting professorship that would allow me to teach advanced courses in adaptive learning technologies while continuing my executive role at Meridian. The invitation represented perfect integration of my academic foundations and corporate leadership, the opportunity to contribute simultaneously to next-generation research and practical market implementation. It acknowledged both the theoretical significance of my work and its practical applications, honoring the bridge between academic innovation and market deployment that had characterized my professional journey. After consulting with Meridian's leadership, who supported the arrangement as beneficial for both organizations, I accepted the position with implementation to begin the following academic year. The role would require dividing my time between Cambridge and New York, creating a structured balance between academic contribution and corporate leadership that aligned perfectly with my professional values. When I shared this development with my family during a Sunday dinner at my Tribeca loft, a new tradition we had established to maintain regular connection without defaulting to childhood patterns, their responses reflected our evolving relationships. "That's wonderful recognition of your expertise," my mother said, demonstrating her growing capacity to value academic achievement she might previously have dismissed as impractical. "The students will be fortunate to learn from someone who has successfully implemented these technologies in real-world contexts," my father observed, acknowledging the value of my practical experience rather than focusing solely on academic credentials. "Does this mean you'll be Dr. Chen?" Derek asked with genuine humor rather than subtle diminishment. "Double doctor? Doctor squared?" The easy conversation that followed, touching on logistical challenges, teaching approaches, potential research, directions, reflected how fundamentally our family dynamics had evolved from the patterns that had dominated our earlier interactions. We discussed my professional development as a significant and valued topic, rather than rushing to center Derek's activities or parental priorities. This transformation hadn't erased our history or completely resolved all dysfunctional patterns. My father still occasionally defaulted to authoritative pronouncements rather than collaborative discussion. My mother sometimes slipped into conventional assessment frameworks when discussing personal choices. Derek had moments of entitled expectation that required gentle boundary reinforcement. But the overall trajectory had shifted decisively toward more balanced, authentic connection, one that honored individual differences while maintaining family bonds. The change hadn't emerged from dramatic confrontation or complete separation, but from consistent boundary maintenance, clear communication, and willingness on all sides to evolve beyond established patterns. As I stood at my loft windows after my family had departed that evening, watching sunset light transform the Hudson River from blue to gold, I reflected on the multiple transformations the past 9 months had encompassed. The acquisition had changed my financial circumstances and professional responsibilities, My family relationships had evolved from unbalanced patterns toward more authentic connection. My personal identity had shifted from seeking external validation to recognizing internal worth. None of these transformations had occurred instantaneously or without challenge. Each had required intentional attention, strategic decisions, and consistent maintenance of new patterns. The evolution continued daily, requiring ongoing commitment rather than representing a completed process. But the trajectory was clear and sustainable. I had moved from seeking recognition to extending appropriate value to all relationships, professional, familial, and personal. I had shifted from either accepting or rejecting family patterns to transforming them through clear boundaries and authentic engagement. I had evolved from defining worth through others' assessment to recognizing contribution through informed evaluation of actual impact. The $10 gift card that had symbolized systematic undervaluation now sat framed on my office wall alongside my MIT doctoral diploma and the acquisition announcement, not as a reminder of grievance, but as acknowledgement of the journey from external validation seeking to internal worth recognition. These artifacts represented not just professional achievement, but personal evolution from seeking approval to extending appropriate value. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: integration complexities at Meridian, preparation for the visiting professorship, ongoing navigation of evolving family dynamics. But I would meet these challenges from a foundation of clear self-valuation and appropriate boundary maintenance, neither rejecting connection nor requiring validation beyond informed recognition of genuine contribution. This balanced perspective, maintaining relationship while establishing appropriate expectations, represented the sustainable middle path between isolation and exploitation. It created foundation for authentic connection without sacrificing personal boundaries or professional autonomy. It honored both individual worth and community belonging without requiring sacrifice of either. As twilight deepened outside my windows, I turned back to my desk, where planning documents for both the Meridian integration and the MIT visiting professorship awaited attention. The work ahead, both professional and personal, would require continued intentional effort and strategic decision-making. The transformation wasn't complete, but ongoing, requiring consistent reinforcement of emerging patterns rather than defaulting to established dynamics. But the path forward was clear and promising, not because external circumstances had changed, though they had significantly, but because internal perspective had evolved fundamentally. The true transformation hadn't been the $90 million acquisition, but the recognition that worth exists independently of others' willingness to acknowledge it, that validation matters most when it comes from those who truly understand the domain of contribution, rather than those connected by obligation or expectation. That clarity would guide whatever challenges and opportunities the future might bring, a compass for navigating both professional evolution and personal relationships from a centered position of self-knowledge and appropriate boundary maintenance. The journey continued, but now with clear direction and sustainable balance between connection and autonomy, achievement and relationship, individual worth and community belonging. The one-year anniversary of the Meridian acquisition arrived with the crisp golden light of October in New York City. I marked the occasion by hosting a rooftop celebration for both the original Neuralink team and the Meridian integration group, who had become valued colleagues over the past 12 months. As I surveyed the gathering, talented professionals whose combined efforts had not only successfully integrated our technology, but expanded its applications beyond our initial projections, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment tempered with thoughtful reflection. The year had brought remarkable success from a business perspective. Our adaptive learning algorithms now functioned across Meridian's entire platform, generating a 42% increase in meaningful user engagement and a 27% decrease in user abandonment rates. The technology had begun expanding beyond the initial social media integration into educational applications, clinical diagnostic tools, and enterprise training systems. Meridian's stock had risen 63% since the acquisition announcement, adding tens of billions to its market value and validating the strategic vision behind the integration. My professional standing had evolved commensurately. Industry publications regularly included me among the most influential figures in artificial intelligence. Invitations to keynote at premier technology conferences arrived weekly. Several prestigious universities had approached with offers of board positions or distinguished research fellowships. The visiting professorship at MIT had commenced with enrollment in my advanced seminar exceeding capacity within hours of registration opening. These external validations, while gratifying, held different significance than they might have a year earlier. They represented recognition of genuine contribution rather than serving as the primary source of self-worth. I valued them appropriately, without depending on them for fundamental validation, a distinction that created sustainable balance between achievement and identity. The year had also brought significant personal developments. I had established comfortable but meaningful routines in my new home, transforming the Tribeca loft into a space that reflected both my professional achievements and personal aesthetics. I had cultivated more authentic relationships, based on genuine connection rather than professional utility or family obligation. Most notably, I had begun a promising relationship with Dr. Adrian Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, a neurological researcher I had met through MIT, whose work on cognitive processing complemented my technological focus while his warm intelligence and quiet confidence provided personal connection I hadn't previously prioritized. As the celebration continued around me, with collaborators engaged in animated discussions about future technological applications, I found myself contemplating the most meaningful potential of the success we had achieved. The acquisition had transformed my financial circumstances, professional standing, and personal relationships. But its most significant impact might lie in possibilities not yet fully explored, in how those resources could be strategically reinvested to create value beyond personal benefit or corporate profit. This line of thought had been developing gradually throughout the year, influenced by conversations with Adrian, discussions with students at MIT, and my own reflections on meaningful contribution. While the integration work had rightfully dominated my professional focus initially, the anniversary marked an appropriate juncture to consider broader applications of both the financial resources and technological capabilities now available. The following morning, after sending appreciation notes to everyone who had attended the celebration, I opened a new document on my computer and began outlining a framework for strategic reinvestment of success. The exercise wasn't merely financial planning, but a structured exploration of how accumulated resources, financial, technological, and relational, could be deployed for maximum positive impact. The outline took shape across several key dimensions. First was technological application, identifying underserved sectors where our adaptive learning algorithms could create significant value beyond commercial markets. Educational systems serving disadvantaged communities, clinical applications for cognitive disorders, assistive technologies for differently abled users. These represented domains where our technology could generate substantial positive impact, while receiving limited investment from profit-driven development. Second was financial reinvestment, determining how portions of my acquisition proceeds could be strategically deployed to support innovation addressing fundamental human needs, rather than merely generating commercial returns. This wasn't traditional philanthropy, but targeted investment in technologies and approaches with potential for sustainable, scalable impact beyond what market forces alone would support. Third was knowledge dissemination, developing frameworks for sharing technological understanding in ways that enabled broader innovation without compromising legitimate intellectual property protection. This included educational initiatives, selective open-source development, and collaborative research frameworks that balanced proprietary protection with knowledge advancement. The framework development continued over several weeks, becoming increasingly detailed as I consulted with experts across relevant domains. Adrian provided valuable insights from neurological research perspectives. Former academic mentors offered guidance on educational applications. Trusted colleagues contributed perspectives on implementation feasibility and scaling considerations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.